Hi and welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I've got a bin over here on the shelf. It's the one in the middle on the top shelf that needs some attention today. In that bin, for the past 28 days, the worms have been set up to try to migrate them out of the material. So, maybe a couple months ago I decided that the material in that bin was pretty much ready for harvest. So I took the slow route to getting to that point. Sometimes you could just go in there and you could separate the worms from the castings, be done with it. More recently, I've been trying the method where you actually let the worms migrate out of the finished castings on their own over the course of time. And during that time, they've received numerous refits of their migration feeding zone, meaning I fed the feeding zone and then I let it go for a number of days. And once a number of worms had collected in that area, I scooped them out, relocated them, I reset the feeding area. Process continued. So there have already been 2 haul outs of worms out of this bin, and today, after another 6 days since we put more food in there, but 6 days prior to that, so 12 days since the last haul out of worms, my hope is that maybe most, if not all, of the worms have actually left this compost on this side. The whole idea between plastic and paper coverings is that the plastic enables the moisture down under here to remain and keep things nice and damp. Over here, the paper is really left on here as a way to let the material continue to dry off even more. I mean, you can even see I've got another system that I actually set up for this process. Yesterday was the first day that this bin was set up to initiate the horizontal migration of the worms out of the finished compost over into the newly built feeding area. In the case of this bin, today could very well be its final day. So we're going to go in here. There's going to be worms in here for sure over where the feeding area is. The real question is, are there still worms in the finished compost? And if not, this bin is history. All right, let's get this thing up on the bench and see where we stand with this one. Well, this should be fun. It's been a while since we poked our nose in here, and it was really just to make sure there was more food in here. Only in 6 days. It wasn't that long ago, but still. It does seem like the 6-day intervals have produced pretty good results in here. I think it was after the first 10-day interval, there was a haul out of worms, but then only 6 days later, even more worms. Quite a number of them were hauled out on the second go-around, and then I think even the 6 days after that was when we came back in here to just make sure there was enough food remaining. But even then, we saw a good number of worms, but at that point we just decided let it ride and let's see how many we can just collect all the way to the end, and maybe we can just at some point soon consider this as a finished batch. Anything that's not broken down shouldn't really be classified as finished compost. So if what I'm rummaging through over here in some way doesn't seem entirely like what I'm looking for, little sticks everywhere, should take better care not to have stuff like that in here. I could do a little quality assurance here at this point, but it really doesn't matter, I mean, I generally don't sweat a lot of little bits and pieces, because, for the most part it is pretty nice stuff. Yeah, the stuff on the top surface tends to feel really dry and nasty, but as soon as you go, half an inch down already, you got nice, beautiful, damp castings. They protect themselves pretty good from drying out. So let's see, there's various ways to go at this, I suppose. Maybe at this very edge we just confirm that there's no worms remaining in it. At this point, if I do encounter a worm, I'm just moving it over just like any other rejected material that I feel doesn't belong in my batch of finished compost. Worms will definitely qualify as not being wanted in here. So we'll put them over there with the rest of their little friends. But so far seen no worms. Material is still a little clumpy as you go down. Still got some good moisture to it as well. But it breaks apart pretty readily. It probably wouldn't hurt this material to sit a little while longer, let it dry even further. But, just stirring a lot of this dry stuff that's out here on the surface into the material that I've dug up from down low, I think also helps kind of balance out the moisture level between the really dry stuff and the really more damp stuff. So far we're doing pretty good, because we haven't even encountered one worm that we would need to evict out of the finished compost. So this stuff, I've got another box that I could put this in with some other older red wiggler castings. It's a tub that I've been actually dipping into to create my potting soil mix to put my seedlings into. So I did actually make room in that container a few days ago by taking some of the castings out of there and using them. Okay, here's our first worm that we've encountered. It's a regular size adult worm. Oops, okay. I wonder how many more we're going to see. And that's pretty good. I mean, if you look at that, we're right there on the border anymore. Even here I could see a few worms right up here near the surface. The stuff over here on the very edge is pretty damp, that's for sure. But I think if we kind of break it apart a little, let the sun shine in, then the worms will see that and they'll want to burrow away. But then again, if I'm seeing the worms, why not just grab them? See, now I'm getting smart. I'm starting to think the way my my viewers think. So far, yeah, this stuff is nice. I am trying to take any larger chunks and at least crumble them up a little bit into a few other smaller pieces. Try to help them along as far as drying off a little bit, sharing their moisture with some dry stuff. This must be paper that I don't know, I had some paper that I just probably shouldn't have used as bedding in worm bins. Stuff is sticking around forever. I did actually watch some of my old videos leading up to now in this bin as far as how things have progressed from the very early days. And I remember putting this paper in. I could see it in the videos as I'm laying it in. It's paper that the leaf bags are made out of, and paper that is probably designed not to break apart just because it's getting a little wet because you left it out in the rain or something like that. It's paper that I believe is probably treated in a way that prevents it from being infiltrated by bacteria and getting broken down. I guess the constant moisture and everything else just isn't enough, and the flavor must not be there either, because otherwise, you know, it would probably show signs of some nibbling away. And it probably gets to that point eventually once that chemical has, you know, kind of faded away. Hopefully the paper eventually becomes something that the worms would consider edible. We're right there on the edge, guys. All these worms just hanging out right on the border. Why don't they just dive down into the nice gooey material? And I'm only going to take a little bit of this gooey material from the edge. The stuff that looks like it's just really nice castings and stuff that clearly doesn't have any worms in it. Stuff is also, when I mix it in, it's going to help with sharing some of its moisture with the dry stuff. I can see all kinds of cocoons. They're all coming over with the, you know, with the finished castings. This one's pretty dark in color, so it's probably pretty close to being ready to release its little inhabitants, the little wormies in there. I believe there's more than one that's going to come out of one of those typically. Some of these little guys are pretty small, but they're not stupid. They know where the cozy area is, and it's right there on the edge where there's all that moisture. Oop. I guess the really little ones could be pretty tricky to spot. They're not very big at all. And I've already spotted a couple in some of the more damp material that I just shook loose from this edge. Brought with it a few pretty puny little wormies. And I bet you there's lots that I'm just not seeing. Really, really puny ones that are probably burrowed down into some of these moist little balls of material. Let's see, what else can we round up from here without too much hassle. See right here too, there must be something really yummy that they're all working on together. Let them have that. Finish it off at the new place. So yeah, I mean, I think if I keep chipping away deeper and deeper towards the heart of this feeding area, I'll naturally continue encountering more and more worms. So at this point, any place I see a worm, I'm just putting them back. I think that's more or less what we get out of this harvest. So I'm going to grab these last couple little guys. Wouldn't want them stranded out on a barren, foodless pile of material. Although, you know, if you look through this stuff, it's clear that they would have, you know, plenty of food for a good long time, especially if there was only a few of them. And there will be a few of them, and they'll be fine. Right here, this is what's getting moved over into the newest of my red wiggler bins. So let me get something that we could plop these little guys into for transport, and we could put this away, make a little room, and then release these guys into the new home. I believe this piece of plastic should be enough to put these guys into. This will go along with them as well. Bunch of good stuff to pile into the newest of my bins. And that new bin really began with the first haul of worms that came out of this system. So all those worms that were in here have all been, you know, placed into one new place. You know, sometimes you'll take the worms out of a batch like this and you'll start splitting them up, you know. Start 2 new containers with the worms that you've got. I bet you there's enough worms that have come out of this system with which 2 systems could have been started. What kind of leftovers did we I remember there was this big banana peel that was put in there pretty late in the game. I believe that was actually the last application of food. And I knew that that would, like, you know, really bring in the masses. You could see a good number of worms in here. Doing away with the food gradually, but some of the more recently added stuff is still clearly identifiable. A lot of times it's fun to try to release the worms in such a way that there's not all kinds of other stuff obscuring your view. So a lot of times I'll really try to whittle it down to kind of a worms only, but in these cases, what are you going to do? You know, you got all this material that they're inhabiting that they've already broken down partially. It's a good number of castings already as well. But it seems like the most sensible way to bring them over to their new spot with a whole bunch of material that they're inhabiting that's already super cozy for them and perfectly suited for them to hang out in for a while longer. Just in case they don't feel comfortable in their new space. Although their new space should be very similar to what they're coming out of here. Alright. I think we've got everyone, because at this point, this is a done deal. This bin is being harvested, or has been harvested at this point. See little imperfections, a little piece of plastic, I believe, maybe. It's hard to tell. It's very bright in color though, so it does seem like it's probably unnatural. But everything else in here, the other little specks of stuff that you see, are all things that are going to continue to break down nicely, I believe. Even those pieces of paper that I believe are chemically treated, I think eventually they'll all go. They'll all get broken down over time. Just that whatever it is that's turning the, you know, the worms and other creatures in the bin off from consuming it is probably just got to dissipate and leach out of the material. So this is what we've got. I've got another bin that we could go ahead and empty these into, but I could do that later. Pouring a bunch of castings over is boring. I think what's more interesting is watching these guys get situated in their new home. So why don't I go grab their new home now, and we'll release them. So here we've got my newest bin. I've been sort of keeping track of how many worms I think are in the system. And my spreadsheet, you know, always tries to reflect not only what I think, but what people in the audience think. So just for the record, I believe that the two estimated haul outs equate to a total of what's now estimated to be about 1,600 population in the system, according to our best guesses from watching the videos and everyone kicking in their thoughts on that. So here too, I'll definitely be curious to hear what people think. It's funny, this one worm over here is in between the plies of the paper towel. Must have made it in right through this little opening on the side. Over here I can see some mold growing. This is kind of fun. This is such a new system. So the worms are just starting to feel pretty comfortable out here on the top surface. As you saw, there was a number of them out on that piece of paper as well, on the paper towel. So here we've got a nice little carbon treat, little bonus for them to nibble on. But this right here is what we're after. You know what? I think before we release these little guys, why don't I bring the camera in just a little bit closer, be able to better see what we're doing here. I think any closer than that. So I believe I've got just about that here. Okay, let's let these little guys go. I'll try to spread them out a bit so we can see how many we got, and then I'll have to hear people's estimates on how many worms we ended up rounding up here in the end. It's not all just worms either. It's just worms inhabiting their food and bedding that they've been given. There's definitely a good number of them here, especially amongst these chunks of the banana peel. All right, let's let them go. So much food went along with this feeding zone that came over with these worms is that it almost seems like this should count as a feeding for this bin. Yeah, some of these food chunks have lots of worms hanging out in them. Here's more banana peel. These must be just chunks of paper like this. Just pieces of bedding. Just curious about other pieces of leftover food. Like this is the part of an avocado seed, one that's been sliced up into pieces. I mean, most of this just looks like goop soaked bread. I'm not sure how much more of this is really leftovers as far as the bait is concerned. It's just more avocado seed shell or something like that. Maybe a little more banana peel over here. Maybe the little edge of some sort of a veggie. No, this is the avocado itself. That's what it is. That's the avocado shell, and that's some of the leftover avocado itself. So there's a little bit of leftovers in here as far as bait is concerned. So I don't know if it's enough to be considered as a feeding for this bin, or is it just stuff that came with the worms? Yeah, I'm not going to count this as a feeding. It doesn't seem like it was meant to be one. It was just stuff that came along for the ride. I'll just reuse these pieces of cardboard here. A little bit of a goop layer, kind of a goop barrier. Spread a little bit of this around so as to not make the piece of paper towel that we're piling on top of it get all stuck to it and everything. Look at the size of these sticks. Wonder how long it's going to take for that to break down. Okay, well, that was fun. Let's get everything put back together over here. Here's the paper towel, which I assume still probably has that little worm inside of it. Oh, look at that. He decided to try to escape. Oh, come on. Now I know how he got in there. He didn't get in through the edge. He came in through a hole that he made for himself. That hole aims upwards to where all the moisture is going to be collecting under this piece of plastic, so I'm sure he'll be pretty content right there. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.